What if I told you the sword is not cutting the bottle? That is the first secret of sabrage. It looks like violence. A blade flashes. A champagne bottle snaps open. Glass and cork fly forward in a spray of bubbles. But when it works properly, the saber is doing something much more precise. It is not slicing through glass. It is finding the bottle's weakest point, starting a crack, and letting the pressure inside the bottle finish the performance. This is why one of the most theatrical rituals in wine is also a tiny lesson in physics. The famous story begins in France, in the age of Napoleon. The exact origin is debated, as it should be with any story involving cavalry, champagne, and swords. But the legend is irresistible. French officers return from battle. They are mounted, armed, and celebrating. Champagne is the drink of victory, but removing foil, cage, and cork is awkward when one hand is on the reins and the other is near a saber. So the saber becomes part of the celebration. A quick stroke along the bottle, a flying cork, a shower of bubbles, and suddenly opening champagne becomes a performance. There are versions involving Napoleonic cavalry. There are versions involving aristocratic estates. There are stories that pass through the world of Veuve Clicquot and the culture of post-revolutionary France. Whether every detail is true is less important than what the ritual became. Sabrage turned champagne into theatre, not just a bottle being opened, a declaration, victory, ceremony, excess, confidence. But the theatre only works because the bottle is already holding something powerful. Pressure. A bottle of champagne is not just a bottle, it is a pressure vessel. Inside, carbon dioxide from the second fermentation is dissolved into the wine. That is what gives champagne its bubbles. But it also means the bottle is under serious pressure, often around 5 to 6 atmospheres, roughly 70 to 90 pounds per square inch, about 3 times the pressure in a typical car tire. That pressure is always pushing outward, against the cork, against the glass, against every curve of the bottle. So why does a saber work? Because the bottle has 2 vulnerable features. The first is the vertical seam, the faint line where the molded glass comes together. The second is the lip at the top of the bottle, the raised ring just below the cork. Where that seam meets that lip, the glass is under extra stress. That is the target. The saber does not need to be sharp. In fact, sharpness is not the point. The spine of a sturdy blade can work because this is about impact. The blade slides along the seam and strikes the lip. That small impact starts a fracture at the weakest point. Then the pressure inside the bottle does the dramatic part. The crack races around the neck, and the cork, collar, and top ring of glass shoot forward together. The real hero is not the sword. It is stored energy. This is the part that feels impossible. If there is that much pressure inside the bottle, why does the entire thing not shatter? Because glass does not fail everywhere at once. It fails where the stress is concentrated. In sabrage, the break begins at the intersection of seam and lip. Once that path opens, the pressure escapes forward through the neck. The rest of the bottle is thick, strong, and still intact. So the energy takes the easiest exit, forward, through the fracture, out with the cork. That is why a clean sabrage can look so controlled. One piece leaves, the bottle remains, and the bubbles rush after it. It is not magic, it is a controlled failure at the point most likely to fail. This is also why sabrage is not something to improvise in a crowded room. It involves pressure, glass. The bottle is held at roughly a 45-degree angle, pointed safely away from people, windows, lights, and anything fragile. Then the blade is laid flat against the bottle, not the cutting edge, the spine or flat side. It slides smoothly along the seam toward the lip. The motion should be continuous, not a chop, not a wild swing. Momentum matters more than brute force. The blade reaches the lip, the shock enters the weak point, and the pressure completes the break. That is why the best sabrage looks almost relaxed. The person doing it is not trying to overpower the bottle. They are giving the bottle exactly the failure point it needs. Myth 1. The sword cuts the glass. It does not. If this were about cutting, the edge would matter, but a dull saber, the back of a strong knife, or even another hard object can create the impact. The sword is not a knife here. It is a delivery system for shock. Myth 2. You need tremendous strength. You do not. Force without alignment is how bottles chip, crack badly, or shatter. Smooth technique matters more than muscle. Myth 3. Only an expensive saber works. An elegant champagne saber looks wonderful. It belongs to the ceremony. But the physics does not care about luxury branding. The bottle cares about the seam, the lip, the angle, and the impact. The tool matters because it must be sturdy and controlled, not because it is sharp. For more than 2 centuries, sabrage has lived between history and performance. It has the romance of cavalry legends, the polish of luxury hotels, the drama of slow-motion champagne spray in golden light. But beneath all of that is something even better. A bottle designed to hold pressure, a seam that creates a line of weakness, a lip that concentrates stress, a blade that starts a crack, and 70 to 90 pounds per square inch waiting to finish the job. So the next time you see champagne opened with a sword, remember what you are really watching. Not swordsmanship. Physics. The blade gets the applause, but the pressure opens the bottle.